Yesterday we discussed how with the practice of just one thing, namely sati, mindfulness, we accomplish the practice of the three trainings of sila, samadhi and panya automatically, like saying three at a blow. In this, mindfulness also is involved, leading to the practice of the noble path of eight constituents. And group-wise, it is made up of three groups, namely sila, samadhi, panya, or eight kinds in terms of the noble path of eight constituents. Or, speaking in terms of sadhana, teachings, sila teaching, sila sadhana, samadhi sadhana, and panya sadhana. Like we say again, one plug, one bunch. When we take just one thing, we get many things. This can be verified with your own practice. So day by day, we are taking upon ourselves these wholesome mental states to purify our physical, verbal, mental behaviors and cultivate insight, so that these behaviors become blameless, pure, gentle and affable. So one's life becomes pure and lofty and uplifted, so that we overcome this suffering as a result of these defilements, and also weaken or overcome the consequences of these defilements. It is very inspiring. In whatever undertaking it may be, if there's anything to overcome or extinguish avijja, tanha, ignorance and craving or desire, most effectively will be the best quality. Now here, sati, mindfulness, has this kind of qualification, which also involves the three trainings of sila, samadhi, panya, and the noble path of eight constituents. Today we shall discuss the subject of avijja, tanha, how to subdue these two unwholesome mental states, or even extinguish them, overcome them, with the most effective way. Whatever is most effective in subduing or extinguishing these two unwholesome mental states, avijja and tanha, will possess the best quality and give the best result. So we shall discuss today this subject both from the theoretical and practical aspects. Arising in the body, at the moment of their arising, with the method of the satipatthana, then one will not become aware of the existence of mind and body. Just like we say, if we don't look, we will not see. If we don't note, we will not know. Not looking means not being mindful, leaving the mind unrestrained with the practice of satipatthana. Not seeing means not knowing. So if one looks, one is bound to see. That means if one notes, one is bound to know. So if one does not look with the practice of satipatthana, especially the truth of suffering, dukkha satya, all these psychophysical phenomena in the body, then one will not know, or one will not become aware or cultivate knowledge. The Buddha has said that this dukkha satya, the truth of suffering, is to be fully understood. So then, fully understood if we practice to cultivate insight, knowledge, with the practice of satipatthana. Because one is not mindful, one is not aware. That is avijja, not knowing is avijja. Now, ignorance is not totally ignorant. One knows something, but knowing in a wrong way. That also is ignorance, avijja, comes under this word, avijja. Now, avijja, to explain this word avijja, it has two connotations. That is, let us say, if somebody is born blind, one does not see at all. Because one has no eye sensitivity. One sees nothing. This is one kind of ignorance, one kind of unseeing or not seeing, one kind of blindness. Another sense, of course, one is not born blind, one has the eye sensitivity, but as a result of this cataract or glaucoma especially, one becomes blind, or one sees something but not rightly, vaguely, not clearly, vaguely. So avijja is like that. Not seeing the truth is one thing, and seeing in the wrong way is another way. There's another connotation of avijja. Not seeing the truth, seeing in the wrong way, or misperception, or misunderstanding. So to put it down to practice, let us say we want to bend our hand. Now, first of all, there is the desire or intention to bend one's hand. This intention or desire happens in stages. This is mentality. Now, as a result of this mentality, intention to bend, there occurs this bending process, gradually bending your hand, which is materiality. Bending in stages, not at once, of course. This bending in terms of, or manifested as stiffness, tension, movement. This is the bending process. This is the materiality. So in this way, there occurs this mind-body process as one bends one's hand. In another sense, this intention mentality is the cause which gives rise to the materiality in the form of actual bending, stiffness, tension and movement. This is the effect. So that is this cause and effect process of conditionality. So if one is not mindful at the moment of bending, then one will not see these two things, mind and body. The intention, which is a mentality, and the actual bending process, which is a materiality. And also one will not become aware of the conditionality, that is the cause and effect process, this intention to bend, causing the actual bending process. So all these two things make up avijja, ignorance. Because one is not mindful with the method of satipatthana, one does not see the truth. So if one does not see the truth, what does one see? One sees that, it is I who is bending, and the one who is bending is I. In this way, you insert, or you bring in this view of atta, self or soul, or living entity, or some abiding core, abiding substance. So this abiding core, this living entity is doing this bending process. And previously also when I bent my hand, it was this atta, self or soul or living entity, or abiding core, which is doing the bending. And now also it is the same living entity or abiding core or self or soul which is doing the bending. So in this way, one brings in the view of atta. This is seeing in the wrong way or misperception. And this in itself is another kind of avijja, ignorance. So at the moment of bending process, there occurs this mind and body in stages. And the conditionality, the causal mode of bending. Because one is not mindful at the moment of arising, one does not see or become aware of these two processes. That is avijja. So what does one see is, it is I who is doing it. I, which is self or soul or living entity, is doing it. In this way, this is wrong perception, misperception, that in itself also is avijja. So in terms of textual language, the first one, that is not seeing the truth as truth, is apatipatti avijja. And seeing in a wrong way, misperception, is known as micchapatipatti avijja. So, not in essence, avijja, translated as ignorance, is of two things: not seeing the truth, seeing wrongly. Therefore, coming back to our maxim, not noting and knowing, we attach. Because we are not mindful, we think it is pleasurable. Because it is permanent, it is pleasurable, and this gives rise to craving, tanha in Pali. The corollary to this is, if one is mindful and fully aware, then one will not attach, one will detach. So, hence, not knowing the truth, knowing in the wrong way, is two aspects of avijja, and attachment as a result of ignorance is tanha. The Pali word, this atta, in the Sanskrit or Hindi, atma, has given in the Hindu Dasana texts, in their literatures, scriptures, there are of two kinds. One is Paramatma or Parama-atta. And the second one is Jivatma or Jiva-atta. These two things. Now, Buddhist texts also mention these views held by these Hindu ideologies. But as for the first one, this Paramatma or Parama-atta, Supreme Being or Supreme Atta, it has been described as governing the universe. It governs the universe, controls the universe, knows things which are to be known. It knows all, or know all. And one and only one. There's no other two, or no other person, no two, only one. As this is how it has been described in this Hindu text, as of this Paramatma or Parama-atta. Buddha says this as Maha-Brahma in the Buddhist literatures. Now, the second one, this Jiva-atta or Jivatma or Jiva-atta. Now, this acts as commanded by the Supreme Atta. It exists, it is said to exist in every being, in the form of this Jiva-atta or living entity or abiding core. Each being has this abiding living entity, Jiva-atta, depending on their sizes. For instance, in an elephant, the Jiva-atta is very large, whereas in an ant, it will be very small. So they are all, they exist diffusing every being. Every being is diffused with this Jiva-atta, and it is permanent and never perishes. In the body, it exists in the body, and even if the body dies and perishes, this Jiva-atta does not perish. It will transfer, it will go to another new body and continues to exist in that new body. And also there's a view that if one can purify this Jiva-atta, individual atta, individual self or soul, one is liable to be saved by the Supreme Atta, Supreme Self or Soul. This is the another view. And then one will experience limitless bliss or pleasure. So here, the Buddha says, the realities are mind and body, and the causal mode, the causal effect, and nothing else. Because one is not mindful at the moment of arising with the method of Satipatthana, one does not see the truth and sees in the wrong way, so that one's views becomes distorted. That is what the Buddha said. And again, this view of Jiva Atta, it is a Jiva Atta which exists in the body, which sees, hears, tastes, touch, and so on. All these experiences, all these things are experienced by this individual self or soul, which exists in every being. So this is, and then also this Mahabrahma or Brahma Atta gives the command. This individual soul acts at the command of this Supreme Self or Soul. And at the command of the Supreme Self or Soul, if the Supreme Being, Supreme Self or Soul says it must see, then Jiva Atta, this individual Self or Soul, has to see. This is how it has been described in the Hindu scriptures, texts, since the time immemorial. Only when Buddha came into enlightenment, he refuted this theory of Atta, both Parama Atta and Jiva Atta. Instead of Jiva Atta, there is this mind-body process, and instead of this Parama Atta, there's no such thing as Parama Atta, which creates everything. But what exists is this causal mode, cause and effect process. So these are the realities of mind-body process and the reality of causal mode. As for the majority of beings, because they are not mindful with the method of Satipatthana about this mind-body process, or causal mode, one is subject to this ignorance. Two kinds of ignorance: not knowing the truth and knowing in the wrong way. Let us discuss this subject both from the theoretical and the insight point of view. For some reason, we have to bend our hand. What majority understands in their own language usage is just bending. The man is bending, the woman is bending, person is bending, being, individual, I, you are bending. So in the worldly sense, in the or normal sense, it is quite correct in the normal life, in the real life. But going beyond this real life, normal life or worldly life, when one considers like this, is it the Paramata, Supreme Self or Soul, commanding this individual Self or Soul to do it? Then one can have this sort of idea. Because one is not mindful of this mind-body process, one sees in the wrong way. One holds a distorted view that it is Atta, Self or Soul, which is bending. And this bending process is at the command of this Supreme Self or Soul. And one is acting according to the wish or wishes of this higher authority, namely the Supreme Self or Soul. What is the root cause? The root cause is not seeing the realities with the practice of mindfulness at the moment of bending. To become aware of these two things, namely the intention, which is the mentality, and the resultant materiality in stages. which is the actual bending process. Because one is not aware of that, with the practice of Satipatthana, one not only becomes ignorant, not knowing, but simple not knowing, but also knowing in a wrong way. So, what actually happens at the moment of bending is the intention, which is a mentality, and then the actual bending process, which is the materiality. So these two things, the nama, consciousness, which knows the object, and the materiality, rupa, which is made up of stiffness, tension, movement, and so on, which does not know things, which is called materiality or rupa. So there are only these two things, nama and rupa, or mind and body. And they are quite obvious at the very moment. So at the moment of this bending, there's an intention in stages, continuously arising, followed by the materiality of actual bending process. These are the realities. So if one is mindful at the moment of arising, then one is bound to see these two things. The mentality of intention in stages, followed by this materiality, stiffness, tension and movement in stages, only these two mind-body process. So if you are mindful at the very moment, as we say, strike while the iron is hot, then we are bound to see the realities. Only when you are mindful, there will be this sati leading to insight or knowledge. And when you are noting also, you note with full force, sustain mindfulness with exertion of energy and precise targeting, not ordinary mindfulness. You must connect with the object instantly. Then only you will be able to follow these materialities. As stiffness arises, then you will see the stiffness, and if tension takes place, and if you are mindful, you will see this tension, and so on and so on. So only these two things at the very moment. You have these two mental powers which you have to mobilize. If not, you will not be able to see the realities. And also, you need to move your bending process, bending slowly, bend the hands slowly, move slowly, because everything is in a state of flux, the old giving place to the new. The mind-body arises and passes away very fast. So unless you follow closely, instantly, with mindfulness, you will not be able to catch up with these objects as they arise. So note as you move slowly, with precise aiming and energy, with mindfulness, there will be sustained mindfulness, and the mind will fall calm and collected on the object. It will not run away elsewhere. There will be no distraction, and you will observe these realities, namely the intention, which is the mentality, and the materiality in terms of stiffness, tension, movement, actual bending process. So at the very moment, if you are mindful at the very moment, you will see the mind and body, the mind or mentality in the form of intention, and the materiality in the form of this actual bending process. Craving as a result of this ignorance. There will be no tanha. Tanha will not have a chance to rise in a stream of consciousness. In a sense, this materiality of bending is the effect, and this effect is not causeless. It does not arise without a cause. It has its cause and the intention. So because of the intention to bend, there is this effect in the form of bending process, only this cause and effect process. If one is not mindful at the moment of arising, one will not know the truth and know in the wrong way. And doubts and uncertainties can arise, distorted perception and distorted view. So the intention to ban is followed by this actual banning process. And then one may hold that distorted view or distorted perception, like the banning process, the materiality it happens by chance. It is costless. There's no cost to it. That may be the kind of view held by some people because of this distorted view, that it is chance banning process. It is costless. Or even if one takes as due to cost, one may hold that it is done by or it is created by Mahabrahma, or because it is commanded by Mahabrahma. That is holding the fictitious cost view. So this view of costlessness is known as Ahetuka Ditthi, view of costlessness. And even if one accepts the causative view, one must hold the relevancy of cause and effect, not irrelevancy. So because of this intention to ban, there is this banning process in stages. And because of this, because of banning, intention to ban, there will not arise this stretching process. And because of the intention to stretch, there will not arise this banning process. So this is irrelevancy. So this is the relevancy is that because of the intention to ban, there will be banning process. Because of the intention to stretch, there will be this stretching process. That is the relevancy of cause and effect. So this is how one can find out, observe the relevant cause giving rise to relevant effect. Not created by a creator, supreme being, or Mahabrahma. In this way, if we come to understand the relevancy of cause and effect, if we are mindful at the moment of the arising, and also one will come and see the Nama-Rupa process, the reality of mind-body process, if you note at the very moment with the practice of Satipatthana, so that there will be no impurities in the form of ignorance, and one will come to see the realities of mind and body. That is why the Buddha has exhorted to do self-research, to practice in order to see the mind-body process at the very moment. This awareness of knowledge, awareness of the truth, is not from hearsay, not from thoughts, imaginations, or books or teachers. It is from your own empirical knowledge. With the practice of the method of Satipatthana, at the moment of the arising of the mind-body, with the application of these mental powers, precise targeting and energy. So this is the correct method to see this mind-body process and the process of conditionality. This is knowing the truth. So once you know the realities with the practice of Satipatthana, light will come. When light comes, darkness will go. When knowledge comes, ignorance, unknowing, will not have a chance to arise in your stream of consciousness. Ignorance in two forms: simple unknowing and misperception. So there will be no chance of this thing, attachment, as a result of not being mindful. So if one does not know the truth, then there can be a lot of doubts, delusion, bewilderment, such as holding the view of causelessness, or even if one holds the view of cause, that cause one may think that this is caused by a supreme being like Mahabrahma, and in this way one will find this fictitious cause. So, just finding the cause, which is not the real cause, is known as Visamahetuka deity, or fictitious cause view. And also, other impurities will not have a chance to arise in your stream of consciousness, like dissatisfaction, aversion about disagreeable objects, and so on, which lead to immoral behaviors, unwholesome deeds, dacharitas. So for ordinary beings, they are not mindful with the practice of Satipatthana. Instead, they leave their mind uncontrolled, unrestrained, so that they are not aware of the truth. So this current of ignorance will flow, the stream of ignorance will flow forever. And now also, as a result of this ignorance, there will arise this craving. It is this I who is enjoying the pleasure and so on. So in this way, this craving also will arise on a full-time basis, wishing for more and more pleasurable things, desiring to enjoy more and more pleasurable senses, pleasurable things, sense objects, on a full-time basis. So, being holding to the view of Jiva Atta, Parama Atta, individual self or soul, or the supreme self or soul, this current of wrong view also will flow, leading to undesirable sacrificial rites and these wrongful practices, like bathing in the water in the river in the cool season to wash off one's sins, or to sleep on bed with thorns, and also surround oneself with 5 kinds of fire, Panchatapa. So, all these unwholesome, unskillful deeds, such as aversion and so on, can arise. They will flow like streams or current. The current of kilesas leading to the current of immoralities, dacharitas. So because one is not mindful at the moment of the arising, one will not be aware of these processes of mind-body, cause and effect. Instead, if one is mindful at the moment of the arising of these objects, with the proper activation of mindfulness, then one will cut off this stream or current of ignorance, avijja, that is at the moment of knowledge. Furthermore, there will be this tanna current, the current of attachment or craving, will also be cut off, will stop at that moment, and so will be the deity current, the current of views, wrong views. Of course, it is not totally cut off as yet, at this stage. Same thing with other impurities, like aversion. They will be cut off, and there will be no chance of this impurities to arise in your stream of consciousness. In this way, they are said to be cut off at this very moment. And so will be this stream or current of immoral behaviors, dacharitas. So once the avijja current is cut off, other currents also will be cut off. Because of one thing, other things also cut off. And how valuable is this mindfulness, even one moment of mindfulness, at the very moment of this arising. Seeing this clear-cut, seeing this process of mind-body and causal mode in a clear-cut manner, one is able to cut off these streams, so many streams, so many currents. So the practice is to be mindful with the method of Satipatthana, so that one can check the flow or stop altogether for the time being these kilesa currents which were being drifted along through our lifetimes. How significant this process is. We rid ourselves of these impurities and our mind become pure, as we said yesterday, as we discussed yesterday. It becomes pure, Ariya. And then with the right practice leading to the end of suffering. End of suffering, as a result of the end of defilements, we gain another quality, namely Samma Dukkha Gami, leading to the end of suffering or end of defilements. So in this way, we gain these two qualities at that very moment. So one should understand that by saying we come to the end or cutting off of this kilesa current, is that it is only checked or cut off only on a part-time basis, not yet on a full-time basis. Only they are checked at the moment of this practice. So we are trying to, of course, check and cut off altogether. But only when we realize this path consciousness are we able to cut off these currents to the point of no return. That's why we have to practice this insight of vipassana practice in order to weaken and check the flow of these kilesa currents, and with the realization of the path consciousness we can cut off altogether, otherwise not. Therefore, first and foremost, we must practice to be mindful of every arising with the method of Satipatthana in order to check the flow of these kilesa current and cut off on a part-time basis, trying to weaken them in a way. At this point, for your general knowledge, we may discuss one incident which took place during the Buddha's time. One hermit, ascetic, who has already attained his jhanic powers, thought about the world in general, especially about the flow of kilesa currents of impurities everywhere in the world. There are these currents of ignorance, currents of craving, currents of wrong views and other impurities as well, and are leading to all sorts of immoral behaviors everywhere in the world. First, in a slow current, flowing with the slow current, slow stream, and then gaining momentum with the rapid flow, with the rapidity of, with the force of a waterfall. And one needs to check the flow, weaken it, and if possible, cut it off altogether. If not, these currents are bound to lead to much suffering, and it is necessary to do it part-time, and then if necessary, full-time basis. That was what he had thoughts about this world in general. So he came to the Buddha and posed these questions. Venerable Sir, the currents of impurities flow everywhere in the world, and how would one check the flow of these currents? That is one thing. And how to cut off these currents altogether? That is another thing, another question. So the question is of two parts. And of course the Buddha answered in brief. One can check the flow of these currents with sati and cut off the flow of these currents altogether with insight knowledge and path consciousness. So now the yogis are practicing as the Buddha has exhorted, to note the immediately arising object with full force. If not, these kilesa currents one is bound to be drifted along this kilesa current, the current of impurities. With the mindfulness, one can check and weaken these currents. And with knowledge, one can cut off momentarily if one cultivates knowledge at the moment of this knowledge. Because of this mindfulness, one is weakening the flow, checking the momentum of the flow of these currents. How nice it is, this practice of mindfulness. If one gains insight, then one gains a liberating insight. One is bound to cut off these currents altogether. Cutting off, what are the things which are cut off? Things which are cut off are these kilesas, impurities, which are the causes of suffering. So if these causative agents are absent, if they are totally cut off, because they are causing, they are harming, they are causing sufferings. So when these things are cut off, defilements are cut off, then there will be no suffering. So there will be only pleasure, happiness. But this kind of pleasure is not the kind of pleasure which you can get from senses, from pleasures of senses. It is a blissful peace which you can get out of the practice of Satipatthana. Therefore, to this end, we are practicing, cultivating this mindfulness and to cultivate knowledge. Buddha himself has said with great compassionate feeling, seeing the suffering of beings being drifted along the current of or stream of impurities, because while they are being drifted along in the water, they're drifting along and they have nothing to hang on, to hold on. They cannot reach the bottom, because too deep. Neither can they reach the top. There's nothing to hold on, nothing to hold on the sides as well. In this way they drift along the currents. The root cause lies in not relying on oneself, not depending on oneself, not exerting energy, not practicing, but instead leaving the mind uncontrolled, unrestrained. So having compassion, he said, depend on yourself, not on others, not on others like Mahabrahma and so on. So when we say depend on yourself, means do we have to depend on our body which has no guarantee, no security? It's not. One must depend on the Dhamma, the law, the truth. And what does that Dhamma? Dhamma is none other than the practice of mindfulness, guarding the mind all the time with constant mindfulness. If one is mindful, then one will not be drifted along this current of stream of impurities. Buddha has given this method of salvation. But it is up to the beings who are drifting along these currents to save themselves, to land on the island, and if possible to land on the shore. So it is up to the beings, that is to practice this Satipatthana. So knowing this process of mind and body, the mentality, the intention to ban and stages, followed by the materiality of actual banning in stages, or the causal mode of intention giving rise to the actual banning. So if one is mindful and fully aware, what will happen? The result is that there will be no current of avidya, ignorance. The stream of ignorance will be checked. And then one will not be drift. That means one will not drift along this current. Neither will one drift along the current of craving, attachment. This will not arise. This will also stop. Seeing the true nature of objects, one will not drift along the current of wrong views, deity, and same thing with other impurities. Other impurities. Since there will be no other impurities, this kilesa current also will stop. And at this moment, because of the absence of wrong thought, word and deed, with the practice of the three trainings, one will not drift along the current of dukkha, immoralities. One comes to the land, one is landed safely on the shore. So this is self-salvation, depending on yourself. Buddha only gives the method. It's up to you to save yourself, to become liberated. So daily yogis are practicing this mindfulness. With one noting, with one moment of mindfulness, they are saving themselves, liberating themselves, not to drift along these currents. So they are every time with one mindfulness, one moment, they are saving for one moment. With 10 moments of mindfulness, with many more mindfulness, then they are saving many more times. So in this way, they are relieved. They are not drifting along the currents, these currents of immoralities and so on. As the Buddha has said, you are depending on yourself and not others, and you are depending on the Dhamma, not others. You are depending on the Satipatthana practice. So I exhort you to continue to practice the Satipatthana so that you get on the shore. That's all. That's all. That's all.